You see, breakfast is not time for us to look at what the papers are reporting. The Nation newspaper with the screaming headline, Judgment Day for PDP. Appeal court judgments today in 9 consolidated cases on crisis. Chieftain in fresh move to save party. Next is Nigerian Tribune. Electoral Act. Political parties differ on IPAC's threat to boycott 2027 elections. It's desirable, that's according to NNPP. It's too early, but not foreclosed, that's according to the ADC. Nigeria News Direct is the next newspaper. Middle East tensions drive petrol prices above 1,000 naira per litre nationwide. Hits 1,120 in Lagos, Kaduna, Kano, Ibadan, etc. Next is the Business Nigeria. Nigerians groan as petrol hits 1,040 in Lagos, 1,080 in Abuja. And the Hope newspaper is next. Motorists, commuters groan as fuel sells for 1,100 naira per litre. And the Punch newspapers that talks about the Middle East crisis having its ripple effect on Nigerian oil. Rising fuel prices, NNPC may supply foreign crude to Dangote Refinery. The Platform Times. Senate panel flags 210 trillion naira questionable entries in NNPCL books. Committee dismisses Ojulari's explanation as inadequate. Next is Observer Times. Army denies 40 soldiers killed. The killed reports. Brand story fake news. I'll take that again. Army denies 40 soldiers killed report. Brand story fake news. As Chief of the Army Staff, or Chief of Army Staff, General Waidi Shaibu storms Maiduguri, orders immediate reinforcement to Borno Theatre. Next is the Abuja Inquirer. FCTA uncovers 224 ghost workers. Wiki approves confirmation of 1,659. And Blueprint newspaper. It will take hundreds of years to achieve gender equality. That's according to the United Nations. Tinubu wife Akpabio. Others hail Nigerian women's resilience and integrity. And this Nigeria, VAT windfall. Plenty win for states. Little sunshine for citizens. Lack of visible projects angers Nigerians across many states. And the Guardian newspaper, which appears to be last but not least, stakeholders may forfeit dividends as CBN penalizes insider abuse. I'll be doing this with my colleagues in the studio, Nelson Netta and our in-house analyst, Biodun Shomi. We see that the Nation newspaper talks about, issues, going on within the erstwhile ruling party, which is the PDP, that boasted that they would rule for, after 16 years, they will rule for 60 years. But unfortunately, they are emerged in serious quagmire. They're not exactly sure what should happen. So judgment day for PDP. If you see the riders, they say appeal court judgment today in 9 consolidated cases on crisis and chieftain in fresh move to save party. So we're expecting that the Court of Appeal in Abuja is expected to deliver its judgment on the prolonged leadership crisis within the PDP. So that of the appeal courts, the court advisory is also there, the Ibadan High Court affirmation and the Ekiti governorship candidate. So different issues, facing the PDP. How have you been reading, this issue with the PDP? Let me start off with you.
It's really sad what is going on with the PDP, because it would look as though the PDP is crumbling faster than it is helping itself to stand, really. And that then puts a dent on opposition politics in the country, which, a lot of persons have been crying about it. I'm trying to find how to, come in here without having to sound biased, in a way. I'm only hoping that the PDP will be able to put itself together. Now they have 2 factions, one submissive to the minister, and then the other one to, the governor.
And the Turaki, NWC.
So it's let's wait to see really what the judgment would be, and then hopefully that is where the matter would end, or maybe they will still push it to the to the apex court to probably put a final nail on the coffin. But I'm really hoping that the PDP members of the PDP can be matured enough to call themselves on a round table and say, guys, let's sheathe our swords against each other and rebuild the party so that they can have a semblance of opposition and maybe, give some persons a run for their money. Because what is going on now?
Nelson is advocating sheathing of swords, but if you look at the Turaki NWC, they actually produced, which was produced by the November 2025 Ibadan Convention and supported by the PDP Governors Forum, which was later described as WhatsApp group, by Wike, and then we have the Wike-backed faction rejecting that same convention as invalid and recognizes, a national caretaker committee, led by the Abraham Mohammed. How are you reading this?
Well, it's quite clear there are 4 issues involved. The issue is the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. The second one, is the Electoral Act itself. Then you also have the party, the PDP Constitution itself. All these 3 are alleged to have been violated in the process of conducting that convention. The courts, federal courts have intervened and the Oyo State High Court. The federal High Court, restricted the INEC from performing its official function, saying that they must not monitor it. And therefore, if they go ahead with that convention, it will be in violation of the Electoral Act. Number 2, another federal high court, I think, headed by Justice Lifu, in the case involving a former governor, who is Lamido, who is actually challenging, the PDP for its exclusion. And then Lifu is saying that, look, in line with your own constitution, you must include him. So therefore, you cannot hold the convention except he's a candidate in that election, as prescribed by the PDP's own constitution. But the PDP governors went to shop for another judgment in Oyo State High Court, which they got, saying that they could go ahead, in defiance of 2 federal high court judges' decision. And because they are courts of coordinate jurisdiction, nothing remains final. So all the appeals went to Court of Appeal. So they've all been consolidated around those issues, which is the Constitution of the Federal Republic, Electoral Act, PDP Constitution, and disobedience, to federal high court orders, which is a contempt in any way. So at the end of the day, we will know what the Court of Appeal says today. But my own gut feeling is that probably the Wike faction will win this, based on precedent, based on Supreme Court past judgments and the realities which we all know. You cannot defy.
I know you're not trying to enter into sub judice because the court has the final say at the end of the day. All right, then let's look at this Nigeria News Direct. The same with the Business NG. The same with the Hope newspaper and the Punch newspaper, talking about the issue going on, stemming from the Middle East. As the Nigeria News Direct puts it, Middle East tensions drive petrol prices above 1,000 naira per litre. And then Dangote is also, Nigerians are actually groaning as petrol hits 1,040 in Lagos. So you see NNPCL also looking at the Punch newspaper, in the newspaper, say NNPC may supply foreign crude to Dangote Refinery. All in all, Dangote is saying that we have to look for alternatives. NNPC is also looking for alternatives. Like, okay, rather than importing directly from the US, we'll do the Naira for Crude, Naira for Crude initiative has to be renegotiated.
Of course, that will also really help the dollar to, the Naira to, to be strengthened up. Ibrahim, look, at the end of the day, because again, that's part of the conversation we're going to have. After all that happens, Nigerians just want to be able to buy fuel, because again, the question is, it's happening in our country. Why do we need to pay that much for it? And so that's the matter. Because when I drove in yesterday to buy fuel at that rate, I thought I didn't see me buying fuel at that
like, when was the last time I bought fuel for this high price?
Naira, 1,000 plus naira actually in the 2%. So it's a sad one going on. Hopefully, with some policies and other ways being looked into it, we'll be able to find other means to help that to come down. And I think the NNPC, which is embroiled now in this 210 trillion naira, would be able to stand up to meet up this kind of this, because that's what they're there for.
Some people be asking questions. It's the Middle East war. It's only the Strait of Hormuz that was closed, but we understand that Strait of Hormuz is between Iran and Oman. And the oil coming from the US to Nigeria, they don't actually pass through, that road. They come using the Atlantic Ocean from New York, down to, Lagos, and some other, roads. But the question is, if the global oil price is rising, Because Nigeria actually pegs its own oil price too, according to Dangote, according to the global oil price. That's why we are facing the problem. What is the essence of communication in this issue that we're facing?
I think the most important thing is for the Nigerian government, to highlight the fact that the spike in the price of either PMS or whatever, or the crude oil price, which is tied to international market price, is not as a result of removal of subsidy or government policy. This is more or less a force majeure. This is an issue which we have no control over. Yeah. It's due to the global crisis, which is ongoing. On the issue of the closure of Strait of Hormuz, Strait of Hormuz is not technically closed because Iran has not declared it closed. What Iran is doing is they're playing a very heavy political game with that, in the sense that on one part, they allow the Chinese, the Russians, and some friendly nations ship to pass. Through. Whereas on the others, they can't go through if you're aligned to countries against
even insurance companies are already pulling out.
Already, even those insurance companies are not, including shipping companies like Maersk, Hapag-Lloyd of Germany, they are not willing to take the risk. So that's the major problem. It's just the climate. If Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz fully, then we are in big trouble. That would take away 20% of global.
Do you blame them for using that strategy? I mean, it's
no, I don't. I mean, I don't. They are under assault.
Exactly.
I mean, their country is being destroyed. Their leaders are being killed. They're being attacked day and night. So they have to respond one way or the other.
Absolutely needless. Nelson, I'll come with you. Come to you with the Observer Times. But in the meantime, this quite related, Mr. Shomi. If you look at the Platform Times, Senate panel flags 210 trillion naira questionable entries in NNPCL books. So committee dismisses Ojulari's explanation as inadequate, carry former officials to appear before lawmakers. And if you look at this amount of money, it's so huge. 103 trillion naira in accrued expenses and 107 trillion naira in sundry receivables. All this money is unaccounted for. This is huge.
Look, that's a 210 trillion naira we're talking about. I don't believe that 210 trillion naira can be stolen from the NNPC or from our economy without anybody noticing. This is my own personal opinion. This is what I think happened. Over a period of 4 or 5, a number of years, the auditors would have been auditing the account of NNPC. If you cannot explain certain things satisfactorily, what they do in accounting terms is to qualify it. They qualify it against the next report, hoping you bring satisfactory explanation. If they are not satisfied again, they will qualify with the old ones, and that's what has accumulated over the years. So now we're faced with the problem of leadership have changed, personnel have changed. Now, how do we expect Ojulari to explain it?
They gave him 21 days, to...
It's never going to work. It's only the past officials.
Between 2017 and 2023.
Absolutely.
Military was also invited, and one other leaders.
Those are the people who can explain it. The fact of the matter is the reports were qualified by the auditors, and those are the figures being picked on, by the Senate. But they are fine. They are within their right to carry out oversight function. But to expect by Ojulari to explain it, for me, it's a tall order.
Okay, all right then, let's move on quickly.
If the data to back up the fact that over the years they've not been able to explain themselves satisfactorily, then it shouldn't even be in a corporation like an NNPC. You should not be able to explain yourself.
It's the most opaque institution.
In the same sentence. How are you doing that? Come on, that's tautological.
NNPC is the most opaque institution in Nigeria. At least that's the public belief.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right then, let's move on to the Observer Times. This is quite interesting story. Not so interesting because it's sad, but at the same time, it's significantly interesting. Army denies 40 soldiers killed. Killed report. Brand story. Fake news. Now, the Chief of Army Staff, General Waidi Shaibu, storms Maiduguri, orders immediate reinforcement to Borno Theatre, and President Tinubu approves pay rise for military personnel and renewed offensive. Public urged to rely on official channels as probe into false reports continues. So Sahara reporters actually reported 40. Yes, they suffered casualties. They didn't release the figure, but they said that 40 was way out of it, that it never was up to that number of people down who were killed.
Well, even though, like you said, they didn't release the figure, why wouldn't they have released the figure if they wanted us to know that some kind of fatality had happened during that exchange?
Sometimes they do not release these figures because it might probably demoralize our soldiers, and we do not want to be at the mercy of the enemies.
Of course, I totally agree. And so again, Sahara Reporters or any other reporter, as the case may be, journalist outlet, understanding that kind of, measures being put in place, should be careful about churning that. Now, whether that is even true or not, the army has come to say that this is a false matter. I don't know whether it's false in terms of the figure or in terms of fatality. That's a different conversation. But I think we need to be careful in churning that because, like you said, we don't want to be be at the mercy of anybody who is trying to fight against it. But absolutely, most importantly, Ibrahim, we need to keep the push on our part stronger every other day so that we win the war against insurgency. I don't want to hear that any one soldier lost his life.
Let's race on. Moving on to the Blueprint newspaper. It's saying it will take 100 years to achieve gender equality. That's according to the United Nations. And, they broke this down. If you look at the SDG goals, we moved away from the MDG goals. So SDG goal 5 talks about gender equality. And they said it now depends on where you're looking at it from. If you're looking at it from legal protections, it takes over 226 years. Workplace leadership takes 140 years. Child marriage, 300 years. Economic participation, 135 years. And political empowerment, 40 to 47 years. That's a far cry.
The easiest one is the political empowerment.
Right.
You would not believe it. It's about the sustainable development goals. The practical reality, even in Europe, if you've had the experience of working there, you know the reality. Because there are more rights granted to workers there. You have, once you're pregnant and all that, a lot of other factors come in. The issue of childcare is there, also with child benefit and all that. We don't have those cost here. And yet we are still discriminating against women, one way or the other. That's why it becomes so totally unacceptable in our own case. The idea that a woman can go on maternity leave is to say that a man cannot fall sick. A man too can fall sick. He can have any issue where he's not able to come to work. There's what they call individual strike. Individual strike is more common with men. In industrial relations parlance, which is when you phone in sick when you are not really sick. Right. Simply because you've been drinking in the pub, it's too late in the night, and you don't come to work every Monday. Every Monday, Tuesday, you phone in sick. If there's a pattern to it, it's called individual strike. So that is also more common with men. Can we now say because of that we will discriminate against men in employment? So, but at the end of the day, those who made these decisions are also men, and that is why women are more badly affected. It's
a catch-22 situation, for both gender. But then let's race on. This Nigeria saying VAT windfall plenty wind for the states, little sunshine for citizens. So we see states getting much more in federal allocation. I think it's been risen from 50 to 55%. Federal government, reduced from 15 to 10%, meaning that states are really getting so much more. Lagos State #1, and they are saying this is states are getting, but what about the citizens? They are not really. So we need to ask for accountability from all of the governors.
Which is one of the questions I want to ask our guests this morning on this presumptive tax. No matter how is it really benefiting the citizens at the end of the day. But Ibrahim, you see now. That's why Nigerians, we need to also understand that it is not always pointing fingers to the center. At Aso Rock, as the case may be, hold your state governors to account. Boy, they are getting a lot of money you don't know. So anything that happens around, we always point fingers, over our heads to the top. No, there's somebody right in front of us that we need to hold accountable because more monies are coming. And one of the writers says, Ibrahim, that projects are angry Nigerians because we're not seeing adequate projects commensurate to the amount of money that they are getting. And this is really important. And so I believe that at the end of the day, we'll begin to see some of the impact of some of these tax reform laws benefiting citizens. Because, Ibrahim, I will always end this kind of conversations on the fact that I want to walk into the market with small money, big goods. Okay,
last but not least is the Guardian newspaper. Look at shareholders may forfeit dividends as CBN penalizes insider abuse. So they talk about, as they race towards recapitalization, directors, the CEOs of this bank, some of them take loans at the expense of those who have savings accounts and all of that. And it's affecting shareholders and all of this. So they're calling for accountability. How do you see this new CBN directive? It's going to create more transparency. Is that what you think?
Well, I think so. Then secondly, I feel that bank directors should not be allowed to take loans from their own banks. They have to go to other banks to get a loan because what they do is insider trading. I remember in the days of Intercontinental Bank, you know, when, I don't want to mention any name, somebody had to buy some shares at 3 naira something, 13 naira something.
Below the worth.
And then through, it got up to 50-something thousand naira per share, and 50 naira per share, and then was advised to sell, and the next day the bank went under. So there are a lot of cases like that where suspected insider tradings have been alleged, but a lot of it is the same depositors' money, which those bank directors are to take care of, being borrowed to go and buy the same shares, either in their banks, and then when they know there is a sign of stress, they will immediately quickly sell, and at the end of the day, the shareholders will lose their money.
Matter of fact, they said that anyone who is defaulting, the collateral should also be, taken if they defaulted. Anyway, that's about it for the newspapers up for review. Still to come, traders may get relief as federal government moves to end cash tax payments and roadside tax collection. We'll be right back to talk about this.